The search for a new wisdom tradition, a quintessence mystery. The defining crisis of our time is not a lack of intelligence, information, or technology. It's the absence of an integrated wisdom capable of holding them all together. We did not lose our way because we stopped asking questions, but because we stopped integrating the answers. A quick disclaimer: I have no guarantees I am right. My work is interpretive, it grows naturally out of my lived experience. But my frameworks map remarkably well onto religion, spirituality, mystery, physics, psychology, and philosophy. And that tells me that they're worth sitting and exploring. When multiple domains converge on the same insight, that insight is properly worth sitting with, even without certainty. My invitation to you is walk with me. Let's see where coherence leads. Hello, I'm Henry. I'm your facilitator here at the Hidden Bridge. Tonight, I am addressing sort of a foundational part of my work, and I hope you will join with me. It is the search for a new wisdom tradition. When we look at what makes life worth living, looking at the human condition and trying to find where do we go, what do we do, what do we build together, we find the world in a very interesting state. And at the heart, I came up with a search for a new wisdom tradition. What is a wisdom tradition? Let's do a... Right. A wisdom tradition is not a belief system. It's not a religion, ideology, or doctrine. A wisdom tradition is a coherent way of understanding reality, being human within it, and acting responsibly over time. Although the responsibly over time can be misread, but I'll stick with that definition. Key characteristics of a wisdom tradition. It integrates knowledge, lived experience, reflection, and meaning. You'll see a lot of why this is necessary, as so many people have either the wrong knowledge or they are ignorant. Lived experience is touted, but it's the ego. And that is not what we're meaning with lived experience. Very little reflection is done. Just switch on any news bulletin these days. And ultimately, why? Why does anything matter at all? So, a wisdom tradition bridges inner life and outer reality. You'll find one of the core concepts that has come up through all my work is we are not here to escape this world. We are not here to live in some utopia. We have to navigate the reality of this world. And there's a lot that comes from that, but keep that in mind. A wisdom tradition is not only transmitted through ideas, but through practice, embodiment, and example. So when you see that, I always see Tibetan monks doing their meditation and then going out and do things, but they've missed certain other parts as well. But we can learn, and you'll find that that's another core idea. I'm not dismissing anything, but it is how appropriate is it for what we're trying to achieve. So a wisdom tradition evolves without collapsing into relativism or dogma, depending on what side of the consciousness brain you are looking. Are you on the left-hand side with the scientific domains, or in the right-hand side with the irreducible domains? And we'll get to that in a second. But modern society is really experiencing a crisis of wisdom. So many scholars will define 4 specific crises. Our problem is not a lack of information or our problem is the act of a unifying wisdom structure. We've got the 4 modern crises. I'll talk about each one quickly independently. But the crisis of meaning, the crisis of trust, the crisis of comfort, and the crisis of critical thinking, or just interpretation, if that's what you want to call it. These are not separate crises. They are the symptoms of a missing wisdom tradition. The crisis of meaning. People have goals but know why. Achievement without coherence leads to emptiness. Productivity has replaced purpose. Think about your own life, but also the organizations with which you are involved in. Achievement without coherence. Recently it was the Golden Globe Awards, and if you did not see emptiness, then you're in trouble. Is your goal to be the most productive person in your organization? Or do you want to be the most on-target, purposeful person? What does your incentive structures look like? Just some thoughts of looking at why we're experiencing a crisis of meaning. The next big one is a crisis of comfort. Discomfort has been medicalized, outsourced, or just being avoided. There's a pill for everything. Resilience has been replaced with convenience. Very few people today, especially in developed societies, really understand what resilience is. My invitation, come to Africa. You'll find still a lot of resilience here. That's why I would choose to live here more than any other continent. Growth without friction is illusion. Support and challenge. One of my main mentors always said 50% support, 50% challenge, growth. Too much challenge, wither and die. Too much support, crisis of comfort. The crisis of trust. In 2020, something very specific and unique happened, sort of on a 100-year cycle, but it happened. Institutions, leaders, systems, and even expertise proved to be untrustworthy. It's just a pattern that emerged, and you cannot undo it. Neil Ferguson of the Hoover Institute has got a lot to say about that. I suggest you go and look at The Betrayal of the Intellectuals. Trust collapsed because narratives no longer align with lived reality. Very little of what you saw in that period, but even since then, was lived reality. It was imposed ideology. And that is why society as a whole no longer trust leaders, systems, and expertise. Crisis of critical thinking. Sort of see in our picture here the information overload, but the see nothing, hear nothing, speak. No evil, but you get the picture. Opinion has replaced discernment. Everybody's got an opinion. I will not say what else everybody has, as the saying goes. But how much opinion do you hear which is not grounded in reality or based on ignorance? Moral signaling has replaced inquiry. It's about fitting into crowds and being seen as good without actual lived reality, experience, or understanding of the world. Complexity has been flattened into slogans. And yes, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, I have no point either way, so according to many people, that must place me on the right side of the spectrum for not having an opinion. Make America great again. is a flattening of a complex idea. But that's unfortunately something that people who have a crisis of meaning, a crisis of comfort, a crisis of trust, and a crisis of interpretation want to hear. What is the slogans that affect your life? Is it Nike, just do it? What are the slogans that you use to simplify your own life? So, a new wisdom tradition is required. Doesn't mean we throw away the old or reject the past. It is integrating what we know. Scientifically, psychologically, culturally, and experientially. The older frameworks are coming apart at the seams. So hopefully a new wisdom tradition will, let me not go there. I'm just seeing a picture and it will be inappropriate. Older frameworks were too mythic without grounding. You'll see a lot of that. There's a lot of YouTube stuff on that. Scientific without meaning. Oh, yes. To balance out the other one. Too psychological without transcendence. Too ideological without humility. What shall we say about that? But that is why we require a new wisdom tradition. A modern wisdom tradition must speak to the whole human system. We cannot afford what has been happening in the last 75 years. A system where the human spirit was denied and the soul was ignored. And so, yes, I call that the Dawkins delusion, special reference to one of my favorite atheists, Professor Dawkins. I love you because of people like you, I had to do some real research and really reflect on things. But I didn't come to the same conclusions as you did. That brings me to integration. You will see that I'm sort of being cynical towards the scientific community and then slapping spirituality and religion as well, because they're not talking to each other. That's at the heart of seeking a wisdom tradition. Look at the videos. There's a great video channel on consciousness. I'm not going to name them because my goal is not to shame. But they've got great work. But it's all scientism. They will explain 377 theories about consciousness, and it's all materialist, reductionist BS. But great work. I thank you for all the information. Now let's do the other 50% as well. And then you go and look some of the most beautiful spiritual teachers, but they all run into certain problems which I will highlight in a second. People who have really lived life and have really have experienced stuff, and then on the basic principles they trip over. We cannot ignore either side, and that brings me to my concept, integration. The integration argument. Modern knowledge did not become precise, it became fragmented, mostly called silification. We separated physics from how reality behaved. Psychology, how the mind experiences reality. Philosophy, how meaning is structured. Religion, how values and ethics are transmitted. Spirituality, how inner life is cultivated. And the one that everybody trips over, mystery. Really been working a lot on mystery. It's coming, but it's now 6 videos, maybe a 7th one that will be upcoming. Each domain has refined itself but lost coherence with the others. Just Oh, there's so many beautiful people on the internet. Really, the one that comes up the most for me is Alex O'Connor. What a brilliant mind, but deeply, deeply stuck in the axiological limitation. But he is evolving, so I've got great hopes for that brilliant young man. Can't remember his name. The other one is the guy from Unsolicited Advice. Also a brilliant young mind. And they're learning, because that's what I want to see. I'm not here to say you're wrong. Keep on learning, keep on growing, keep finding and adding to what you know. Those are two great minds, just off the cuff, for those of you who want to go into something. On the physics side, always. I've heard no one so far that says there's anything negative about Brian Cox. I can really listen to Brian for hours. Way above what I can understand, but he really opens up the universe to you. Psychology, you do go back into James Hollis, Jungian psychologist, but there are other great ones as well. Back to philosophy, Bernardo Castro. Yes, people criticize idealism, but listen to Bernardo. He will open up a lot of things to you. But how do we put this all together? Because if you see Bernardo talking about consciousness, he's very careful and not to go outside his silo. I may not know the depth of each of these specialists, but how do we put them all together? How do we unify what they know into a single picture? And the problem is, most people do not want that, because you'll see why people are really uncomfortable with the picture that emerges. We've gained a lot of detail through silification. It is at the heart of the modern process of thinking, but we've lost it in orientation. Integration does not collapse the domains into one. Nor does it rank them hierarchically. So we're not saying it's just one domain. We are not saying religion is the most important and psychology is the least important. No. We hold them in a relationship to each other. That's what our graphic here is trying to show. And you'll see why this picture becomes very powerful in a second. Wisdom emerges not from answers, but from coherence. Coherence across perspectives. There is a story that spans all these domains. So what we are trying to prevent in a wisdom tradition is reductionism, scientism, New Age synthesis, and ideological religion and dogma. So we want to de-silo without flattening. So what we do not want to do in a wisdom tradition: physics explaining consciousness away, psychology replacing philosophy, spirituality rejecting science, or even worse, using all these quantum foam, quantum tunneling, and not knowing what it is. And the most dangerous one of all. And I'm very passionate about it because I think I'm one of the first people to actually derive an entire system for mystery. Mystery becoming a belief or a religion. Thank you, Mr. Crowley and Miss Blavatsky, for showing the world what not to do. Oh, I've just committed a heresy in many circles. Maybe we should add John Dee to that picture as well. But there are great mystery thinkers that teaches us a lot. As I always say when people go this route, Jung, 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 Jung. Right, so each domain must remain bounded. Physics has a role to play. Psychology has a role to play, but so does spirituality and religion. Each domain should remain in dialogue with the others, and that is what we're missing. A wisdom tradition is not a pyramid, it's a field, and that word causes so much trouble when you bring it out in various contexts. Consciousness is a field, it's a dynamic field. So a wisdom tradition should also be, shouldn't it? So in my work, it's more about coherence. I want to see how the whole thing fits together. Puzzle pieces are important, but what's the picture on all the puzzle pieces? I do not try to reduce any of these domains. That's not my purview. So I'm not an expert in any specific field, but I do have a vast knowledge spanning all of them, which gives me a unique perspective of trying to see the whole. Not perfect. I promise you no one will ever get the complete picture. I don't think we are capable of that. And yes, for all those saying, oh, but super intelligence, good luck to you. I'll explain to you. We'll come to a bit of the structure of reality. So I work to build a system where each domain remains intact, where we honor what they learn, but how is it intelligible to the others? So, this brings me to what I call the seven-pointed star of being. In a wisdom tradition, what is required is really to address 7 areas which form a collective whole. It's a framework. I promise you, you'll come up with your own. Maybe this is not complete, but I think it makes a hell of a lot of sense. Because we need to understand that if everything is reduced, only one thing remains: being. Oh, that goes wide and cuts deep. Being is the only true irreducible thing. The English language actually honors this. That's so beautiful. But we'll come to that structure. 7 areas that we need to go into. Briefly, I don't want to spend too long on everything separately. I want you to see the picture and join me in this. We need to build a new wisdom tradition, which is in the end, how do we integrate different fields, different knowledges, lived experiences, hard facts of science, traditions that what people observed over thousands of years and then encoded into symbols. It all should form a coherent picture. And this is what I came up with. The 7-pointed star of being. So, a wisdom tradition must address the following concepts. Consciousness, the fact that experience exists at all. The hard question of consciousness. The observer. I personally put it at the end, but in this frame it's just very important. The observer is awareness that can reflect on itself, and that changes the entire structure of reality. There's a lot of beautiful things to be said about the observer, because it's not just in physics that we talk about the observer. Meaning and purpose. Yes, it goes way, way beyond Simon Sinek's Start With Why. But that's a good place to start. So I'm not bashing Simon. Don't say I'm bashing Simon. But yes, he's sort of ontologically not complete. but it is a great place to start asking yourself, why? What gives me meaning and purpose? And the answer is stranger than fiction. Because that brings us to the self. Once again, don't try and tackle this subject without Carl Jung. I know I've had so much criticism. People say, but Henry, comes to this, you're always Jung. What about Freud? I've got a whole thing to do about psychology. I'm not throwing Freud away, but Jung went further and deeper than anybody that I've come across. And he remained coherent across his life's work. That is unique. The self is our identity, our narrative, our continuity, but we'll see it goes a bit deeper than that. Because who are you really? And that's not your name. Oneness. Oneness is another concept, and that trips up actually many people in spirituality. Oneness, connection beyond separation. It is the very nature of consciousness, but we'll get to that. Agency, our next video, more sort of 80% there, then we will release that video. Agency, the capacity to act, choose, and respond. Where does your agency come from? Do you exercise your agency? What is the sovereignty arc that actually allows you to embody agency? And that brings us to the last concept. Embodiment. Wisdom must live in the body, not just the mind. Your life tells me who and what you are. No good or bad here. I'm not judging anybody. But by observing you, the observer, I can see everything I need to see about you. If I listen to you, you will tell me everything I need to know about you. Charlatans and mystics have known this for a long time. When last did you reflect on your own inner language? More important, your own outer language. What do you tell other people is important to you? So any framework that ignores even one of these concepts is distorted. If you can add to that, be welcome. Right, just align with the camera a bit better. Consciousness itself is, of course, the field in which everything happens. The potentiality of awareness, capacity for experience. It is not the content, it is the medium in which it happens. You'll see on our graphic here the toroidal structure of consciousness. Going to spend some time on that. And then you'll see sort of a field, wavy pattern at the back representing the Planck lattice, which the torus runs across. It's not projected from. That's to really understand the whole concept of the holographic universe and what you're trying to say. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Go and read up on it, form your own opinion. Consciousness is not local, it's not epiphenomenon. Sorry for all the people who say it is. There's just way too much evidence to the contrary. Meaning and purpose, orientation within consciousness. Teleology and philosophy, although many modern philosophers are coming from the wrong area, axiology upward rather than ontology, epistemology, and teleology downward. Why does anything matter at all? Why is stuff important to you and not just to anybody else? Are you the generator of that? Did you inherit it? Nature, nurture, all these beautiful things. What gives you meaning and purpose? The self. The differentiated identity within consciousness. It's one of the things that trips people up about consciousness. Consciousness is either a total field, but it has a localized form, the self. A differentiated consciousness called the self. There's the total consciousness field and the differentiated. Boundary continuity narrative values the I. The I that says this is me. And when we do a more extended video on consciousness, I'll bring in some concepts here that will really makes you see the I completely different. Oneness. The drop remembering it's the ocean. That just by itself means it's a relational thing. The universe is relational. The structure of the universe is relations. That's why chaos leads to complexity through dynamic landscapes and networks, great systems. The bridging principle between the differentiated and the undifferentiated. The remembering, and you'll see I've hyphenated that. A remembering, not a dissolving. The drop must remember it is in the ocean and it is the ocean. That doesn't mean the drop does no longer exist. So reconnects fragmentation without annihilating it. So oneness must sit between fragmentation and agency, not above or below them. And that brings us to agency. Agency before oneness is control, compulsion, or reaction, called the ladder of agency. And go and look it up. But agency after oneness is coherence, energy efficiency. It is negentropic or non-entropic, as depending on your language. It is creative. It is a force of focus and building. Action flows with the field rather than against it. That is what agency gives you. Have you given your agency away to an organization, to your parents' opinion, to your identity? Or do you understand that you always have agency? This aligns exactly with the negentropy argument. Centered agency conserves energy, and fragmented agency leaks it. Agency is the ability to focus and become the laser, not disperse the light beam, but bring it together, if you've heard that analogy. Embodiment is where the claim of oneness is verified or falsified. If oneness is real, it survives friction, it holds under constraint, it expresses through the body, time, and consequence. Otherwise, it was just a projection. Oh, sorry. The observer. I'm just burning to do a video on the observer. There's so much mystery about it, and there's so much written in the mysteries about the observer. It has been really perverted a lot. But he who comes without invitation, he who comes by thought alone, you should not speak to him, you should not deal with him, but he will always stand at the crossroads. The function that recognizes remembering. You are here to remember who you are. To individuate, as Jung would say, to liberate yourself, as Nietzsche would say, to integrate yourself, as Heidegger will say. But who is observing that? Who is recognizing that you are remembering? Some people say it is who is the awareness behind being aware? A stabilizer that prevents ego-inflated I am the ocean. Dissolutive that says there is no drop. You can have neither. You are not the full ocean, but you're also the drop does not disappear in the ocean. Hint, that will be fractals. Without the observer, oneness collapses into sentiment or metaphysics. You'll find a lot of that going on. With the observer, fragmentation becomes unity, action, and embodiment. And you have a dynamic coherence. There's our word again. Coherence, but dynamic. And that has implications. So we need to shift from the seven-pointed star to a dynamic view. It's all one thing to form a bigger picture. So that's our dynamic model. A static model explains structure, but wisdom moves. Life is never balanced, it's a dynamic. Trying to explain to people that there's no such thing as equilibrium ever. Only a dynamic system that always falls toward the center but never reaches it. It will either fall short or overshoot it. Trying to balance these elements freezes them. Wisdom requires circulation, integration, and flow. Wisdom is not static. So what happens when we take this star and we spin it? We spin it very fast. What happens when all these concepts gain momentum? It forms a dynamic torus shape. Torus, for those not thinking it's a vortex, but it's the donut-shaped vortex specifically. When the seven elements interact dynamically, they no longer form a fixed shape, it forms a living system. Outward through agency and embodiment is how energy flows, and then experience return inward through reflection and awareness. Meaning is not imposed, it emerges. Stability comes from movement, not control. Wisdom is not a designation, it is a self-correcting living process. You go through it every day. You send your energy outward by making decisions. You are living your life. You are having an experience, and hopefully you are aware of the experience and not living a life of quiet desperation. By reflection and awareness, the information is returned and recycled and rinse and repeat. A self-correcting living process. So that brings us to one of the greatest minds to have ever lived, Nikola Tesla. If you understand the mathematics of 3, 6, and 9, our friend the torus vortex, you will understand the structure of reality. 3, differentiation. 6, interaction. And 9, the integration, flowing outward, having the experience, and integrating what you've learned. The beautiful thing about the torus, and that's why I've got this slide up for you here, is what lies at the center of the torus. Nothing. 0 point, the singularity. Being. And that causes a lot of trouble. So the uneasy question that I get when I bring this up, do you say there is no God? Well, it depends on what your definition of God is. Pure being is unknowable, unconditioned, non-relational, can only be indicated but never grasped. In religion, they will define that as God. In science, they will basically call it 0 point energy. Up to you. I don't care. The truth is there is an unknowable beyond the knowable. And true wisdom tradition will always acknowledge that and not reject it. Being itself, though, expresses itself in a structured, relational, experiential. It can be modeled, lived, observed, and refined. So although we cannot know what being is, we can say how it expresses itself, and it will express itself in a way that is coherent, without exhaustion, and the torus is the only structure that explains that. God remains unknowable because being cannot be objectified. Problem with this, with scientism. Want to objectify everything, want to measure everything, want to control everything. Religion, spirituality, and mystery tells you there is the unknowable that cannot be objectified. And just because you cannot objectify doesn't mean you have to reject it. So there's this bit of a separation there, but can you see that that's why the torus is such a beautiful foundational structure? And I will do a separate video on this. I'm busy with putting it together, the structure of reality. And we go into blank dimension, quantum, atomic, and we are looking at the toroidal structure running as a hologram on a singularity. Beautiful stuff like that, but not remaining in the prison of the silo of physics. But we get most of these beautiful concepts from physics because there were some great thinkers. Very few of them left, though. Final answer, thus, God remains unknowable. Being cannot be objectified. The torus does not define God, guarded, or try to explain the unknowable. It defines the conditions under which being can appear without ceasing to be what is. It will not collapse on itself. Completion and closure, that would be a sphere. You cannot explain the structure of reality with a sphere. It has to be a torus because you've got circulation, renewal, and expression. Funny thing is that in the Hindu mystical tradition, they will tell you that the universe itself forms a toroidal vortex. Brahma's dream, go and read up on that. So being does not collapse into stillness. Being moves through itself and grows. It's got deep, profound spiritual implications. Identity is conserved without fixation. You cannot die. Whatever forms you goes on in some form or another. We don't know what it is. But once again, see the hollow question. It says, either you become nothing when you die or you go to the sweet by and by. We don't know. That's the core. But I can tell you what, that which made you what you are will continue in some form or another. Make of that what you like. Our classic failures that comes from this is dissolution, oneness without return, or fixation, the self without circulation. You can see how you've got these two opposite forces that we need to integrate. And that reveals just a quick thing. If you discover one of the most ancient and most mystical systems in the human history is the flower of life. And yes, it's a 2D picture. If you model it 3D, it becomes a, say with me, toroidal vortex. To ancient times, they didn't know how to picture 3D mystical concepts, so they designed the flower of life according to what they observed phenomenologically, and they encoded it into a symbol. It's mystery. But it is the simplest, stable structure that allows differentiation without unity, movement and identity, expression and return, and knowing and embodiment. And you see why it's so important. That 369 that Tesla taught us about. Being does not collapse under its own awareness. So why all this hoo-ha? Well, what you're glimpsing is not the answer. It is the shape that the answers tend to take when they are not distorted by fear, power, or abstraction. So ultimately, in truth, there is no answer. That's the wisdom. But it takes a shape, and that shape can always be seen by looking at a toroidal vortex. Amazing. So that brings us where I know I spent a lot of time on the toroidal vortex structure. It's just, it explains so much, and there's so much misinformation about it, but it's a core of understanding different aspects and how that relates to a new wisdom tradition. So my next part is the invitation. Let's look at the journey. Rewrite press. So this is not about answers. It's about restoring coherence, building an integrated system of thought. Consciousness, action, meaning in a world that has lost its center. And the polarity is shifting further and further every oscillation. It is not sustainable. The question is no longer what do we believe, the question is how do we live wisely now. That's why embodiment is such an important part of the whole system. You are not living in a 5D utopia, you are not ascending into a 5D utopia, you're not splitting timelines. You are here, right now, and you have to live here. Agency just means that you decide what is the life you want to live. So we have a lesson from the Hermit. For those of you, why I'm suddenly talking about the Hermit, go and look at my Spirituality of the Year and my Psychology Meets Spirituality videos. A lesson from the Hermit. At the end of the Hermit's path, he looks in the mirror. He no longer sees a problem to solve or a self to improve. He only sees a point through which he and life can move. Live in the life you were given. Make the best of what was given to you, because all those things you dream of can be yours, but are you the person that can handle them? At the beginning, the Hermit only sees himself. Me, I am offended. I don't like what you're doing. It is my opinion. At the end, all that remains is seeing clearly. And that then takes me to my final slide. Before I finish off, I really want to say thank you for watching The Hidden Reach. Our upcoming video will be Agency. Go and look at our previous videos. This is a new channel. I'm building it up. I've got so much stuff I want to share with you. But I really want to sort of, at least with the tools that I have, give you something that is worth watching. Not just my opinion, but also not just, you had 5 bullet points about X. I really hope you see something beautiful and share with me your thoughts. I am not going to dismiss you, but at least just remember the word coherence. So I want to take us to the final slide. You see here somebody looking at a cherry tree. And the idea comes from The Last Samurai from Tom Cruise. Brilliant movie at so many levels. They simply don't make movies like that anymore. And this scene, I'm trying to unify two scenes. The one is the famous Bushido scene, and the other one is where Katsumoto dies. Now, in the Bushido scene, Katsumoto tells Nathan, Tom Cruise's character, that how beautiful cherry blossoms are, and that you can spend a whole lifetime looking for the perfect one. But when he dies at the end, well, just before the end, he finally sees all the cherry trees falling, all the blossoms falling from the cherry trees, and he whispers to Nathan, "They are all beautiful. Go and look in the mirror and say, you are beautiful. Will you cross into the world of coherence and integration?" The choice is yours. Thank you for watching The Hidden Bridge. I look forward to sharing thoughts with you in the future.